So yesterday, Bethesda dropped not only an announcement of an Oblivion remaster, which provided loads of information on the improvements made and how important the original Oblivion is to them as a developer, but they actually went and dropped the game for free if you have Game Pass. Now personally, I've never played an Elder Scrolls game, and honestly I have very little knowledge of the franchise. All I know is that they've re-released Skyrim like 11 times at this point, so if you are a diehard fan, I truly appreciate you'll probably get way more out of this remaster than myself. However, that being said, even as a brand new player, I think that this game is genuinely fantastic. I'm currently only about 6 hours into the game, and so far, I have thoroughly enjoyed every single aspect of it. The initial monologue provided when you immediately start up the game just gives it a level of gravitas, and that is largely down to the voice acting of Patrick Stewart. To me, his voice is just immediately recognisable. Any Star Trek fans, X-Men fans, even American Dad fans, you know what I'm talking about here. He has such a distinct voice, and it gives the narrative such weight at such an early stage. It really helped sort of pull me into the world, and just helped craft what is a very solid introduction to a game. I feel like right off the bat from this intro that this game just has days of replay potential, even when you're just initially first piecing together the building blocks of your character. Not only can you customize him a multitude of ways and make him look really silly if you want to, but when you've got the various different skill trees and attributes that you can unlock at varying rates and offer a variety of different builds to your character, the multitude of different ways you can play the game should really be endless, and you should be able to experience the entire game differently upon each playthrough. The story itself, at least at this early stage, is very engaging. Now I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but at the end of the day it is a 20-year-old game. If you're that interested, probably should have played it before. But essentially the main quests within the story revolve around the player's efforts to sort of stop this cult called Mythic Dawn from opening these gates to Oblivion, which basically allowed loads of demons and goblins and shit to come through. And it's all to do with this Uriel Septim's vision that you are going to be the person to stop it. Now as a new player, I do feel like there is a lot to learn off the bat, and obviously being unfamiliar with the Elder Scrolls narrative from the previous games really doesn't help with this. However, I do still feel as if this is quite a good entry point for new players. You don't feel completely lost with the plot just because you haven't played the previous titles. I found that each of the main characters introduced, at least at this stage, do have their own charm, and the voice acting for the most part is pretty solid, even if kind of meme-worthy at times, but I genuinely think that that is part of the game's charm as well. However, I will say that the eyebrow raises from characters really freaks me out. Everyone looks so shocked a lot of the time, and it is really funny, but if you are trying to get really engrossed into the narrative, it can take you out of it slightly. Outside of the main narrative, there are a plethora of side quests and areas to explore and loot, a lot of which you honestly just uncover naturally by travelling to the next piece of the mainline quest. As a brand new player, I did find some of these quite overwhelming, especially if, like me, you just have no idea what you're doing. However, I do love that the game gives you the opportunity to just break out of the main quest line and actually just explore the landscape of Cyrodiil if you want to. The choice is there for you. Again, this really just highlights the game's replayability and just infinite gameplay possibilities. Every single experience you have on there could be different to, say, the next player. There's not necessarily a linear order or a right or wrong way of doing things, it is just purely up to your discretion, and I think that that's fantastic. Now speaking of the gameplay itself, I have found that it is slightly clunky. However, this is where I think players need to take into account that Oblivion is a remaster and not a remake. Obviously the OG Oblivion is nearly 20 years old at this point, so combat and movement within games is far more intuitive in more sort of modern titles. But with that being said, the addition of sprint seems to be such a valuable asset to have in this game. I can understand completely why Oblivion purists may hate it. Believe me, I felt the exact same when they added sprint to Halo. I think it sucked. However, as a new player coming into this, if there was no sprint mechanic, I do feel like it would limit my enjoyment of the game. Unless if there are other ways to vastly improve your movement speed that I don't know about yet. Again, I'm only 6 hours in. Touching on the combat side of things, I am a huge fan of the variety of weapons at your disposal. Even in that really early intro segment when you're in the prison, you can literally pick up like 5 or 6 different weapons in like the first 5 minutes of playing. That's really cool to me, and it already sort of shows the player you're going to get a lot of options here. But it's not just the physical weapons that are at your disposal. You obviously have like the range attacks with the bows, and you also have all of the magical elemental things that you can do. Again, it just provides the player with so much variety and enables you to learn which combat style suits both yourself and what is best to use against the enemies you're facing. Now this game does also involve a large amount of dialogue options, all of which will vary the reaction of the characters within the story. To me, I feel like actively listening in these dialogue sequences is just imperative, not only to just understand the narrative and what's going on, but to actually figure out what you're meant to do next in the game. I really like the fact that this game gives players the option to figure out things on their own, and doesn't like fully handhold them through every single situation. Like when you enter the Oblivion realm for the first time, you are literally just left to explore this deadly looking area with all these enemies around, without a constant waypoint pinging you to where you need to go. I feel like this gives the player not only the chance to have infinitely differing experiences, but also enables them to become more invested in the narrative itself. I feel like a lot of more modern titles purely have you going through the motions of a story, but you're never actually really involved in it as intrinsically as you are with Oblivion. Now there are obviously times where you can follow a waypoint to your destination, however in some cases it is more fun actually using the spells at your disposal. Again, it's almost as like using an in-world, in-game way of locating the objective, which again just adds another level of depth and immersion that isn't always available in a lot of games. Now when it comes to criticisms, I do have a couple of nitpicks with this game, but again they're really not that big of a deal to me. I have noticed that there are a few glitches when it comes to the movement and riding of horses, but honestly I find them quite funny, and it's not as if it breaks the game or makes it unplayable at all. It just might take you out of a moment if you're really invested in the story. And speaking of that great initial opening cutscene earlier and how brilliant it is at building you into the world, I did have it be really choppy on my end. I don't know if that was just a frame rate issue with my console or if I was just lagging or whatever, but it seemed to be really choppy. Either way, very minimal thing, and I haven't noticed it at any other point in the game, but I'm interested to see if it's something that's affected you guys as well. So overall then, my first impressions of this game, as somebody that has never played it before, are that this is an incredibly solid RPG. I can fully understand why this won a Game of the Year back in 2006. Again, I do feel like if you're already a fan of this, you'll love this anyway, like you'll get way more out of this than I ever could because you have nostalgia for it. But if you are like me and coming into this as a new fresh-faced person to Elder Scrolls games, and you're kind of wondering whether this is worth trying, I would definitely recommend giving it a go. Especially if you have Game Pass because, I mean, it's free. It's not free, but you know, you're already paying for it, so you've got it there. But more importantly, what do you guys think? Have you guys tried Oblivion yet? Do you enjoy it? Do you not enjoy it? Do you think it's pretty rubbish? I know some people have said online they're not big fans. Let me know what your thoughts down in the comments below, and if you are new here and you haven't already, please do consider subscribing as it really helps out the channel. Thanks ever so much for watching. I hope to see you in another video sometime soon.